Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Taylor Garcia. Taylor, thank you for being here.
Aaron, thank you for having me on.
Oh, I think you are our first fully West Coast guest, so thank you for that. No thank you for the weather, but whatever, we'll deal with it, but thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Taylor, I know your story. Your story inspires me. A lot of the personal things that you've shared, and I encourage all of our listeners to make sure to follow you. Your handles and your podcast especially will be in the show notes, and everyone should listen to that because it's awesome. I've learned a lot from it, even though we're contemporaries, but that's why I love learning from you, and you're the man. So take us back and tell us, what do we need to know about the upbringing of Taylor Garcia that put him into become the bad dude that he is today?
I think just kind of touch on it. So I never came from I know a lot of people in our industry that I've met come from insurance, whether it's family, it's mom and dad, somebody like that. I never had that. My parents were never your traditional parents. I mean, my dad was a real estate appraiser. But growing up, like I never was that kind of person. I was never around an office or anything like that. I was in music. That was my thing. And growing up in band and in high school, and then right out of high school, I went straight to touring, and I was in a van traveling the country playing drums. And that's kind of what I did. And so looking at me now is so funny to see because, back when I was 18 to 24, that's all I did. I made my money from playing music and creating things. And so if you would ask the old me if I would ever expect I was being in insurance, he would probably laugh. But that's what kind of makes me a little different, is that I'm not your traditional insurance agent, right? I had to think kind of outside the box for it to work for me, which nowadays I feel like it's helped me because that's kind of where it's going. But that's kind of when I first started, it really was hard because everybody looked at it as this isn't the way you do it. And so
did you think that music was going to be your long-term full-time career?
Yeah, that's what I set out to do. I didn't have a job. I just thought I'm going to do this until I make it, until I met my wife. That changed.
So that was, but it wasn't like the passion wasn't there. I assume it was, correct me if I'm wrong, a practical thing, like being a guy who has a spouse and a family. I can't live in a van and bootstrap it to random venues across the United States of America 52 weeks a year.
Correct. Yeah. Once we got married and she was pregnant with our first son, our only son, but our first kid, that was kind of when I realized, like, I'm not making a lot of money. I'm gone a lot, and what kind of the final thing was I was supposed to be in Japan on a tour the week that my son was going to be born. And so that's kind of when we had to make that call of, like, we sat down, and obviously it wasn't even a debate. Like, it wasn't me trying to tell her, like, convince her, but it was like, that was kind of my internal debate of saying, like, I got to put this down. There's a new chapter starting and I kind of have to shift a little bit. And that was all my call. A lot of people think it was her, like, forcing me to do it. It was fully just me going, okay, what am I doing next? Because I'm going down this path and I don't want to be gone struggling and making my wife and child go along with me in that struggle. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like also that's almost like the greatest sign that you could have had was, like, the fact that there was this international tour at that time. It's almost like that it forced the decision. Whereas I feel like if you were down the block on a tour that was local in your neighborhood, or there was something professionally there, you might not have made that decision at that time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I'm like, I can't be in Japan the week,
or maybe you could. I don't know. I now I know you. I know you can't. But
yeah.
But what was it like being on the road like that? Like, actually living out of a van? That seems
It was
Wild to me.
wild. It was wild. And I think back to my parents and letting me do that at 18. Like now being a parent, I'm like, wow. Because I didn't know these people. I just met them. They needed somebody to play drums. It was an adventure, man. And I will never regret it because it was really hard being in a van with 5 guys and me. So six of us in this van going from California to New York and back. It was really, really an experience. I got to see towns that I would never see in my life, see things, experience people. I did so much there. And it was really, really a experience that I'll never, look back on and be like, man, it was really awesome. And I played some really fun shows, bigger shows. I played some small ones to nobody. It was just all across the spectrum. And it's just an experience.
I have 2 questions on that. So you mentioned your parents. What did they say when you told them you wanted to become? I mean, I guess they put you in band when you were a kid, but a lot of people play instruments in their youth
Mm-hmm.
and don't end up in a van when they're 18.
Right. It was tough. It was challenging because nobody in my family was really musical. I was the only one. And so my sister dated musicians. That's kind of how I got into it. She was 6 years older than me. So her boyfriends at the time when she was in high school, out of high school, they all played music. It just so happened to. And so that's what pushed me to go along it. I said, I want to be one of them. And so my dad was the big athlete, jock of all sports. He played all sports, top guys in football and whatever. So when I told him I wanted to join band, it was really hard for him to grasp, okay, my son's not going to be an athlete. He's going to be a musician. But once and then I picked drums. It was really a disaster at age 10 up until like 13. And then I started to get good. I started to get better. And he saw that I was in the garage spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day learning. And he was just like, man. And I just slowly got better and better and better. And then it just snowballed. So at 18, I was like, Mom, I graduated high school. I got this opportunity. She was like, you're insane. And I was like, I really want to do this. This is a lifetime, once in a lifetime thing. And she's okay. And it was just, oddly enough, they were okay with it. They saw how much time I was putting into it. So they were like,
Yeah, and I feel like as a parent, you and I often talk about our children that I'm assuming at that point they said, he's a single guy. What are his expenses? He's not doing anything illegal. He's not doing anything dangerous per se, other than driving a van across the country. But meaning
right.
It's not like you were, decided that you wanted to become a dirt bike racer and you were going to be on some shady back road. It was like that. And I feel like you're right. I think when people see that hustle and when they see the dedication, they come around to things that they probably before that didn't think that they could or would.
Right. And she did meet the guys that I was going with like a couple weeks prior. They came over to the house. We had dinners. Like I tried to introduce them a little bit so they weren't like complete strangers, but they were kind of strangers to me too, to be honest. And so I tried to get used to them a little bit. And yeah, they saw it and they knew that's where I was going. And they knew I was taking music full on, like head on. And so they were like, this could be a start to something. And then when I got into insurance, I'm not going to lie, they were a little upset because they were like, you put so much time and effort into music. What you're kind of like downplaying it and you're kind of pushing this off. And I was like, yeah, but it's okay. It's a new chapter. I'm okay with it.
It's funny because I was actually talking to my kids this weekend. I was telling them that you were coming on the podcast and I was telling them that you were a drummer in your spare time. Yeah. And we were discussing how I also dabbled in the drums when I was a kid.
Okay.
But I grew up in an apartment in Manhattan. So that was a unique experience. And I went away to summer camp one summer and came back and my drums were gone.
Oh, no.
And that was my parents' a revisionist history. My mother, she should live and be well, says it was all my father who wanted to get rid of them. And my father, as you know, passed away. So we can't really ask him now. But you know what? Honestly, the drums are so great. And I think that music in general is great because it's one of those things, unless you are on either extreme, super not talented and tone deaf and beat inept.
Yeah.
And the other side, natural savant where you can just get to a piano and play Beethoven.
Right.
I feel like it's one of those things where in life, what you put into it, you'll get out of it. Like any decent person can get good at the drums or the guitar. Sure. You have to have an ear. You can't be totally tone deaf or you can't have zero rhythm to play the drums. But a lot of it is just like, if you're willing to sit there and you're just willing to work at it, it'll come and you'll start feeling it more and your muscles will get into it. Yep. And that I think is probably a good skill for life. And that parents probably saw as a net positive.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was not good. And you can ask my sister because her room back to our garage and my parents set up the garage for me. It was really cool. And yeah, we always joked. She was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then I remember one time there was a pivotal moment where all she could hear was me playing, right? But I had headphones on so I could hear what I'm playing, but she couldn't. And I remember her coming out like, you've been doing this for years. And like, it still just sounds like hitting things like it's so I put the headphones on her and I showed her the song I was playing too, and I saw it in her eyes just like whoa, because now she could hear the context of what I'm playing to. And that was when she stopped and she took the headphones off and she was like, I didn't realize, like, and I was like, yeah, it's been 8 years of me doing this, like I'm getting there, you know. And so yeah,
Not
it
terrible.
definitely was.
I am not terrible.
It definitely took a lot of hard work, and maybe I just had a natural gift in it too, I will say that, but like for the most part it did take a lot of work to like get to that point of a lot of sweating in the garage and doing that. And that's just, I was passionate about it. And so that's kind of just my upbringing of kind of where, kind of why I am who I am today, was really that. I mean, that was the core of my life up until 25.
So the second question I have to ask you is, what is it like when you meet your wife and she asks you what you do and what your plan is, and you say, I'm a drummer in a band? She's like, oh, a famous band? No, we're 6 guys in a band. Like,
so funny enough, I met her at a show. So she knew me. That's how we met. And she knew right from the get-go. And obviously her family had the agency. They were more well off than I was. And so she had nicer things, everything else. But she, honestly, there was not 1 minute where she doubted where I was trying to go with it, whether we had money or not. She was the ride or die, so to speak, right? So she was like, let's do it. Okay. And so she was there helping me set up all my drums at each show. She was helping me tear them all down while I'm talking to people. She was really, really a pivotal moment too, even in the beginning before we had kids, of just dating. She was there at each one, and we joke because she was 20 at the time, so she couldn't go to the 21 or over shows. And so, but yeah, so it was a really, honestly, she was open to it. And you can ask her too. And she said, she goes, I remember at the show I saw you up there and I was like, I want to date this guy. He's like, and so she knew like off the get-go, and she came up to me after, and it was just, yeah, it just hit.
okay, I'm pivoting my question then. I figured it out. This is the better question. This is that because that makes you seem really cool, and that's like, oh my gosh, this guy's awesome. He's the drummer, and the girl comes over to him after the show, and boom, then he ends up marrying her. But I want to pivot the question because I say this, and I want to give, because not everyone who's listening is in the insurance industry, so I want to just give a little bit of context. Taylor, which we'll get into, currently works at the insurance agency that his in-laws have owned and operated. So I want to just, before I ask the question, the very direct question that I'm going to ask about your in-laws, right. I want to be clear that you have a great relationship with your in-laws. So my question is, how does it go when your wife comes home and she says, I met a guy at a show and he's the drummer and we're dating, and oh, you met the guy at the show, like he owned the music venue, or oh, he's a lawyer and your seats happen to be next to each other? No, he's the struggling drummer. But in all seriousness, like how did, I imagine that having someone like her in your corner was inspirational and right. motivational. And there is nothing, I believe that the people that support us are the people that end up inspiring our hustle the most. And right. you can only go so far with your internal personal feeling and drive, which is important. But when you have someone in your corner who's rooting for you in your hustle, that's not 2x, that's 10x.
Right.
So what was it like when I can imagine that you were thinking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like, her parents are never going to go for this. Like, they're professionals. She has the nice things, and I'm a drummer living in a van. Like, how did you actually make that work?
It was a little challenging at first. I will say my father-in-law was a little tough on it. He was like, you're dating a tattooed guy that plays in a band. Like, my daughter's dating. Yeah. And that's the conversation initially. My mother-in-law was very much more open. She was the one greeted me with open arms. There was no judgment there whatsoever. My father-in-law obviously had a little bit of questions and stuff, and we talked, but honestly, and I was intimidated to go into their house. I mean, they had nice cars, they had a nice house. Like, I was really nervous, and she drove a nice car, and it was just like, I know the materialistic stuff isn't everything, and my wife is very much not like that. But at the time, it's really hard not to think that way. And I knowing my father-in-law's background, and he owns this company, and funny enough, I knew him as Mr. Jackson because I cleaned his golf clubs at the country club prior. So
Really?
when I met him
Oh,
for
I
the first
love that.
time, I was like, oh, Mr. Jackson. And he was like, hey, Taylor. And I was like, oh, we kind of knew each other, not really. And so that was just, it kind of all like came.
You're like, Mr. Jackson, if you're not nice to me, I know how your golf game is. And I will out you terribly. I know how terrible a golfer you are because you're an insurance agent, which means you have to be a terrible golfer.
Yeah.
Did
But
you
honestly,
did you like
Go
take
ahead.
the fork and knife and start like drumming at the dinner table or no? You like held back?
No, it was some learning. It was learning because my family we weren't the formal family. I ate dinner with my sister, not my parents. We never really had that formal family, like family dinners and nice, learned how to use silverware and stuff. So like going into their family, I did have to learn a lot, right? And they taught me a lot as far as, even our religion and other things, right? Finances that unfortunately, my parents just didn't have a lot of knowledge in. So they showed me that. And even in the early on, I will say, like, it was, yes, I kind of had a lot of strikes against me because I was a drummer and I had no money and I had no job, but they were very open. They didn't once make me feel less than because of it or anything. They were like, come on in, let's, and that's just who they are. They're just very generous, open people. You can come stay at their house. No, it doesn't matter who you are, like, and so they were just always those kind of people. And so I felt at home from basically day one.
And then your first job after the band was at the agency?
Yep.
Did you jump right in?
Yeah. So
Oh, man.
yeah.
People tell me I'm crazy for my first job for my parents.
and we
Man.
were just, I think we were just not even married yet. We were just about to get married. And we did things a little backwards. So my wife got pregnant and then we got married. And then she got pregnant. I joined the agency and then we got married. So it was a little backwards, but I remember talking to my father-in-law because he brought it up to me once upon a time. Like, hey, if you ever need something, let me know. Like we got, this thing over here. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm still doing the drum thing. And then once she got pregnant, I was like, okay. So I sat him down and I was like, tell me about this. And so he shared it. I took my license test twice, failed. And I was like, nope, this isn't for me. Like I knew it. I just wanted to try. And then he was like, just try one more time, give it another shot, see what you could do. And I passed. And I was like, okay. So yeah. So that was literally going from that. I mean, I had some retail jobs prior, but that was my real like first job of going from playing in bars and playing in all these shows to now in an office with 10 people. That's a completely different environment. And I was like, oh, this is like culture shock a little bit,
I think we got to it, but I ask everyone if they could take us back to what they were feeling or thinking in the most pivotal moment of their career. I'm not sure that we're there yet because it might not have been when you started at the agency. Mm-hmm. Because anyone who knows that you're a rock star in the industry. So can you take us to, if I pressed you on one pivotal moment, take us there.
Okay, I do remember that moment. After I joined the agency, I was really struggling. I felt like I had a identity crisis, right? Because I was this person outside of the office, but I felt like when I was working, I had to be this completely different person. I had to be in the dress clothes. I had to talk a certain way. I had to act a certain way. And I really struggled with that. And I would tell my wife, I was like, I don't know how to blend who I really am with being a professional, right? And I remember the pivotal moment was I sat down with my in-laws and we had this conversation one night at dinner and I was like, I need some guidance here because I'm really struggling. And they both said it almost identically in sync. They were like, be who you are. And if the client doesn't like you for you, then that's not the right client for you. And they go, if you have tattoos, be confident in them and just go out there and do it. It doesn't, you'll find the right clientele for you. And I was always trying to be something I wasn't. And I think that really, really was a hard thing for me to do. And I was always just in the back of my mind of like, I'm faking this. Like, this isn't me. And that's what made me almost think like, is this job for me until that moment? And they shared that with me. And after that moment, I was like, I'm going to wear a polo and because nobody knew I had tattoos in the office. Nobody knew. And I remember that day I walked in with a polo and they were like, what in the world? You have an arm? Like, and I was like, I'm
you just get that last night?
Yeah. And so I just kept doing it. And I got some comments, of course, but that was a really big pivotal moment to just be authentic to who I am. And that's what kind of like started my actual career. I felt like once I started to be that.
That is a super important point for anyone who's listening, regardless of what career you're in. I'm going to guess, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you also probably started seeing more success in your sales when you found that comfort.
Totally. Because I was way more confident. I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't. And I was talking to the people that liked me for who I was. And so it wasn't me trying to pretend anything. It was just, here's me and all of me. Take it or leave it.
And I'm not knocking, I don't think we're knocking people who are that corporate, buttoned up type. But
not
like,
at all.
if you want a guy who's going to give you 50 spreadsheets, Taylor's not your guy and Aaron's not your guy. We want to talk to you and build a relationship. And that doesn't mean that those people will not be successful. But I think that what you're saying is that, especially in a sales or service business, if you are yourself, then the people who are not going to click with you and be long-term clients and you'll be able to build a long-term relationship with them, they'll be weeded out much earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
And therefore then the people who you're having the follow-up meetings with, who you're connecting with, the sale becomes that much easier because you've actually connected with them. And that doesn't mean they have to be the same. Doesn't mean they have to be drummers, but they could say, oh, you like music, or, if they might not have tattoos like you do, but they might not be opposed to them. They might be interested in that, or they might have a, whatever. So they might know something about that. So I feel like that's something huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people in our office are more detail oriented and analytical, and they thrive with those accountants that want all the numbers and read the policy from start to finish, right? And it's not knocking any of the different types of personalities. It's just finding the clients that go with that, because I've had clients that are that analytical and stuff, and I struggled with them. And every time they'd call, it was like sweating, because I'm like, I got to put on this hat that I'm not normally am. And so once I kind of like pushed those off, and I was like, hey, this isn't meshing well, I had to just find the clients that I was comfortable just talking to and being myself, and not being like, oh wow, this guy's like too relaxed or to this or to that, and that was a huge pivotal moment for me, because then I kind of grew my clientele that way, and it just, it was huge.
Do you think when you came in the literal polo and the persona changed, that the people in the office who knew that you were the son-in-law or future son-in-law or whatever of the owner were like, maybe this guy doesn't have it? Or were they nervous? Or do you think that they were like, this guy's got it? Or how do you think that was the people around you reacted, other than, oh my gosh, this guy has tattoos, either positive or negative?
I think a lot of them at first probably doubted it. Like, oh, here's this guy. He just got hired because he married Sam, and Sam was at the agency. My wife's name is Sam. She was at the agency. So I think in the very beginning, it was from the team's perspective, like, oh, here comes this kid that, he's just here because he got married in or whatever. But early on, when I first started, I was just a file clerk, basically. They didn't hire me to be this big wig. I started at the bottom and I worked my way up. And my father-in-law always told me, everybody's looking at you hard with much more of a magnifying glass than anyone else in the office. And especially if I wanted to be in a certain role, I had to earn it, because I wouldn't be respected otherwise. And he was very true. He was very right on the spot there, because now obviously I'm in a much different role, but those 10 years working up to it, we grew. And so the whole team saw my dedication to it, getting my CIC, doing all the things, being there super early, late, in the evening, whatever it was, the dedication I had to it, that kind of showed them, other than me just telling them. I just had to do it, and walk for the walk,
Yeah, I have a vivid memory. One of the summers, I interned here for 5 or 6 summers before I came out full time, and I have a vivid memory of my father, he should rest in peace, who was the ultimate mentor, and he was awesome. And he was the same way. He was like, first of all, the first summer, they were like, no phones. The only time you answer the phone is if everyone else is on the phone and the phone rings. But other than that, you listen, you file, you do all that kind of stuff, which obviously I think you and I will agree is invaluable experience. But I have a memory where one morning I was living in my parents' apartment. I was a high school kid in summer. And my father, I remember, came out from his room and he's like, what are you still doing here? And I'm like, what do you mean aren't we taking the bus or subway together? He's like, it's 10 to 9. You're going to be late. And I'm like, but,
yeah.
And I remember him saying, you'll get there. But if I were you, I would be the first one in and the last one out.
Yeah.
And until today, I'm the first one in. There were times when I left with my parents, when I drove my father home, or especially when I was living with them, where we left, but we always left after everyone else. But I think that there's there's something to that because I mentioned this before. Like one of my proudest moments in business that doesn't relate to my parents was when CSR, who's worked now with us for 32 years, came into my office one day with a gift card, with a $10 Starbucks gift card, and said, I know you love coffee. Here's a Starbucks gift card. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you and I'm happy to work for you.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, Alice, like, there's one person who I'm thinking she literally saw me photocopy my brother's face when we had a day off from school in my parents' office. Like that's like
Yeah,
both
yeah.
of my parents' age. This lady, like, and she heard my mother screaming at me on the phone when I got suspended and I had to come into the office,
Right.
in elementary school.
Yeah, yeah.
She was in the office, and now I'm the guy who's gonna. So I think there's something. I think there really is something to that. I want to
Yeah.
But I want to just get back to something. So
Sure.
then your personality comes forward, and that's, I think, a big part of your hustle. Do you think that some people in the office were like then embraced you even better because the real Taylor that I know and that everyone knows in the industry, everyone loves Taylor. So I feel like they were probably like, yeah, maybe that he was just like maybe like whatever that edge wasn't really an edge. It was really that discomfort, and now it's like he really is a cool guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It started to come out and it just became a thing. And so the whole team and I mean, still to this day, I mean, we have a few people that have left since I started, but for the most part, everybody here has been the same team. And we just grew to love each other, right? And we're just like one big family. And they did see in the beginning to where I am now. And I've had similar situations to where they've come up to me now and they're like, man, like when you started to now, like, can you know? And so, yeah, I think once I developed to be who I am, whether or not they like it or not. And there was certain things, obviously, of course, I had to kind of reel back or do certain things. But for the most part, once I started to become myself, I was way more comfortable. I was talking to the team more. They had a lot of questions for me. Hey, what did you do when you were in music? Or, we just connected a little better that way than me just being, when I first started, it was more just like I was staying within my shell and didn't really just share anything.
And I think that that's something that people often, especially younger people, overlook in being, if they are inauthentic, is that not only do you have those internal feelings, which are terrible, right? I mean, it's much easier to sleep at night when you know you're being you, but also others can't connect with you because they don't know there's no connecting because it's not you. So it's like, right? Imagine if you come into an office like, and you're passionate about drumming, and then a person you didn't know, but like this lady's son is a great drummer, or this guy is a drummer in his spare time. And if you don't, and that's a connection point, or they hate drummers because their neighbor bangs on their drums and they hate the kid, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
those being authentic is not just easier for the person who's being authentic. I think it's easier for the people who they are interacting with, because then you can, people are cooler when they're authentic, I feel like.
Absolutely. Like I have all my cymbals and stuff hung up on my wall behind me. And when I get a client coming in, no doubt, and I have a few other drum pieces in my office that are more like vintage stuff, and it always sparks conversation. And 9 times out of 10, there's somebody they knew that played drums at some point, and it sparks a conversation. Hey, my brother tried it, or hey, I know that. Like, and it just opens up a conversation, and it's now it's not just let's just talk about insurance and sell you a policy. It's hey, let's get to know each other and like really kind of dive a little deeper. And it's always worked in my favor than it has not.
And then those are the long-term clients. Those are the best clients to have.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, I don't know why I'm fixated on this drumming thing, but I think that it's such an important part of your hustle.
Yeah.
I know that you picked up the sticks, is that what we're going to call it again? We can do that. Picked up the sticks again. So that, I guess, is, I know you in your church, you're doing some drumming. Yeah. What is that like? And how does that, were you nervous? Was it natural when you brought it back up? Is that like, are you back being obsessed and like your wife is like, Taylor, you're working 15 hours a day and then you're drumming another 10, and that's all 25 hours and only 24 hours in the day. So that's not going to work.
No, I'm smiling because it really was a huge blessing, because for 5-6 years, I didn't own any drums anymore. I didn't play, and I was literally just focused on insurance. And we did some photography and filmmaking on the side, but for the most part, it was insurance. And one conversation we had with my wife was, now my kids are 8 and 5, was they don't know that side of me. They've never seen it. right? They would see some, because I have some YouTube videos, they would watch that a little bit, but for the most part, they didn't know it. And my wife would bring it up, like, maybe one day you could show them, right? Like maybe when we get a little bigger house, you can get them another, setup and whatever. And so it just, I was like, yeah, maybe. But in my head, I'm like, that's just, I don't know. I have a lot more important things to focus on. And then my sister attends this church that we all go to, and she works at the church. And so she kind of pushed me to do it, right? It was not in my wheelhouse to play at the church. Mind you, my kids go to a Christian school. So they go to a private school. So everything that we learn at the church, they learn at school, and it's really kind of like cohesive, right? So my sister, we were at service one Sunday and we're talking about it. And she goes, hey, I showed the pastor your YouTube videos. They loved you. They want you to come in for an audition. And I was like, I haven't played drums in 5 or 6 years. I wasn't even considering this. And she's like, I know, but I know you would love it. And I was like, I don't know, sis. Like, I really don't know. And she's like, just go and talk to him. And I was like, ugh. So I did. And I was really nervous because, again, I haven't played in 5 or 6 years. I felt like in my head, it's got to be like riding a bike, right? I did it for 20 something years. Like I could probably just pick it up. And there was some little nuances that I had to really kind of learn. Yeah. So I went and I auditioned and I talked to them all and they were like, holy cow, you're like way overqualified for this. Like, why are you nervous? Like you're way better than most of the people here. And I was like, I don't know. And so I bought an electronic drum set for my house just so I didn't bother the neighbors, because I live in a community with a lot of older people. So I bought an electronic one, put some headphones on, and I just rehearse now. And what I told my wife, and I told even my in-laws, was for the longest time, the career and everything was great. I had the family, I had the career, I have a nice house. Like I had everything I could ever dream of, but the music part of my life was missing. Right. And I was like, and then this with the church kind of like bookended my life, because it was like, I got the career, the family, the whatever. And then now I got the music still. And what was the best part was all the songs I'm playing and rehearsing, my kids listen to at school. So they come and watch me in church. They're singing the songs because they know it. And I'm not playing at a bar and trying to sneak my 5-year-old into
the
a
ultimate
bar.
groupies. The ultimate groupies.
And so they sit up front at the church and listen to me, and I watch them watch me. And it's been the best experience ever. And so I'm glad you asked that, because it really has like rounded out each part of my life.
I think there's no better way to close when talking about your hustle is that your passion, like your kids who you gave up that side of your life for obvious reasons to be home with them, are now getting to see that and probably think you're cool, and or as cool as parents think their kids think their parents can be.
Sure.
And they're experiencing that, and it's almost like you didn't have to give that up for your family, and you can. Not that you have it all, not that it's easy. That's not what I'm saying, because I know you work incredibly long hours and incredibly hard. But
Sure.
like being able to get, as you said, bring that back is like you now don't need to think about what if, because you still have that in your life.
Right. Absolutely. And so it's been a really fun, long journey so far, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. But yeah, so far I got basically, no complaints here. Everything's really good. So
Taylor, you're awesome. We have we close the podcast by asking our guests to share their favorite, current, timely, inspirational, motivational quote. So spotlight's on you.
I have this one. So my wife and I and my family, so we live right near Disneyland. And I don't know if this was actually quoted by Walt Disney or not, because who knows nowadays, but I do have this little thing in my office, and this has been so true to me in everything I've been doing, because for a long time, there was a point for a while there, it was always like, I should do this, or I should do that, or I'm trying to perfect it before I start. Right. So I have this thing from Walt Disney that says the way you get started is to quit talking and just begin doing. And I think with everything I've done, whether it was drums, I could talk about, it was just sitting in the garage for hours and hours and hours and learning, right? With insurance, it was when I came in, I knew nothing. It was doing the work. It was talking to the people. It was just getting out there and doing it. And I think a lot of people, even now with making content and stuff, it's a lot of trying to perfect it. And I think the only way you're going to get good at it is just doing it. And so that has a little thing in my office, and we're big Disney people. So it was a perfect way to kind of finalize my new office, was just putting that up. So
that is keep hustling, doing and actually performing, and realizing that success comes from that. Taylor Garcia, Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you having me on.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.